Recyclico, making lithium-ion last forever. Recyclico's patented recycling process achieves up to 100% recovery of battery metals from lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, and aluminum. Recyclico Battery Materials Incorporated trades on the TSX Venture AMY, on the OTCQB AMYZF, and Frankfurt ID4. For more information, visit recyclico.com or phone us at 778-574-4444. Recyclico, making lithium-ion last forever.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Wolf Richter, publisher of WolfStreet.com. He's speaking to us from San Francisco. Welcome back to the show, Wolf.
Thanks for having me back, Jim.
Wolf, mortgage rates have gone up a lot in the U.S. What's the impact on the housing market so far?
So, in the United States, that the standard mortgage that we have is a 30-year fixed rate, which doesn't change, for 30 years. So as long as you own the home and make your payments, you've got the same payment every month. And that's a very unique structure, and it's government subsidized. So that's what we have. And that poses some unique problems, too, when mortgage rates rise. So now we have 100 million homeowners or whatever that refinance into 3% mortgages. And so they're happy with their mortgages, and they're not going to sell their home, and they're not going to buy another home. They're just going to stay put because they would have to replace their 3% mortgage with a 7% mortgage or 7.5% mortgage. And so that's just not going to work. So they're going to stay put, and they're out of the housing market as buyers and as sellers. So they're gone. That's about 20% of the market. And so sales volume has plunged by about 25% compared to the same period in 2018, 2019. And it's plunged more compared to 2021, but that's compared to the good times before the pandemic. So we've seen that. We've seen sales volume plunge by 25%. A big portion is the people with the 3% mortgages that just left the housing market altogether. It's buyers and sellers. They're not putting the homes on the market. They're not buying. They're not doing anything. They're gone. And so the rest of it is just people now gradually pulling back from the housing market as buyers because they can't afford the mortgage rates at these huge prices. So for them to be interested or able to buy a home, the prices would have to come down a lot. And so they kind of went on a buyer strike, and so that's responsible for another drop in sales. Prices are all over the place. So in some of the cheaper places in the United States, especially looking at Omaha, Nebraska, and Tulsa, Oklahoma, and some of these places, in the middle of the country that had a housing depression that lasted decades, they're now seeing sharply rising prices, but from very low levels. And other markets such as San Francisco, the Bay Area, lots of places around the country, prices have declined. They've declined a lot in San Francisco. They've declined less so in some other markets. Phoenix is coming down in prices. So that it just depends on the market. And in some markets, that's run by mortgage rates. In other markets, like in San Francisco, it's the startup scene. It's a lot of the tech companies and social media companies, that have gone on to a work from home method. And so I'll wait till the Harley Davidsons is gone here, and so the people have left San Francisco and they left some of these expensive areas to work from home somewhere else, and so prices, the demand has just dropped a lot, and prices have come down a lot in those places. So we've seen that impact on mortgage rates, both on volume in that the 3% mortgage people have just left the market entirely as buyers and sellers. And we see it on first-time buyers. We see it on other people that want to buy. There's a lot less going on. And prices overall nationwide have come down a little bit, so some cities are up a little bit, a lot. Other cities are way down. And so the average across the United States is that the median price has come down a little bit. The volume has come down a whole lot. And that, we're looking at a market that's just completely different than what it was 2 years ago.
What does low inventory mean for the housing market?
Yeah, so like I said, the people with the 3% mortgages, they've left the housing market. They're not there anymore. They packed up the marbles and they left. And so they're not putting the homes on the market. So that's why inventory is down, but then they're not buying either. And so that removes the buyer, and so the net impact, so they're not putting the homes on the market, but they're not taking homes off the market either. The impact is zero on inventory. They're not responsible for the inventory decline, so we know that. They're responsible for the sales decline, but not for the inventory decline, since they're not buyers and sellers. So they've moved out of the market as buyers and sellers in equal measure. So what does that inventory decline mean? We've had declining inventories in the United States for 15 years. And the main reason for that is that technology has finally entered the real estate industry, and it takes a lot less long to process, to do the marketing, and to process the deals and so forth, and to close and to get mortgages. And all these things have sped up dramatically. Inventory, we count from the day that a home is listed to the day that the sale closes. So it takes in all the time spans that it takes to market a home. It used to be that you submit the listing to the newspaper, and that would print it on the weekend edition of the real estate section. And then people would look through the newspaper and circle stuff and make phone calls and so forth. And that is now instant. As soon as the unit is listed, it shows up nationwide, and when people are searching for it, there are videos, so people can look can look at the inside of the home via video. They can look at prices going back many years. They have all this information. So as soon as the home is listed, like within hours, you have lots of people looking at it, and in very detailed ways that you could not do it. And then, you can make appointments right on the website. You can apply for mortgages. You can apply for down payment assistance right there on the website. It's all right there now. And, real estate technology has really moved forward on this. Then when you finally buy something, the closing period has shrunk by a whole lot. It used to take weeks to get a mortgage approved. Now it takes a day or several days. It can be very fast. The closing documents in a lot of states are now handled online. So the processes have shrunk. And so just taking these long processes out has brought the inventory down, and we looked at that. It's been for 15 years like that. It's been going down year after year after year, not because there are less houses, but because the time the house spends in this definition of inventory has shrunk, because the processes have shrunk. And so, we're comparing the current inventory to an inventory of prior years that was inflated by these processes. So we don't really know, apples to apples, how our today's inventory compares to what it was 10 years ago, because we don't see that. We see that inventory 10 years ago that was inflated by these long, cumbersome processes that we had in the industry. So, you can tell by the pricing which is coming down. The prices have stopped going up a year ago. So it started coming down then. The peak in the United States was in June 2022. And so you can tell by the pricing measures that demand has backed off, that there is slightly less demand than there's inventory, and that's all, prices are moving lower. The question would be, why has demand backed off? And we've covered some of that. But the inventory situation looks to be roughly in balance with the demand that there is today.
Where do you see longer-term yields going?
Well, the short answer is up. short-term yields have already gone up. They've been up. They're right now at 5.5% in the United States. Long-term yields have, so you're talking, anything over longer-term yields are 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 7, 10 years, 20, and 30 years. So those are the long-term yields out there, and the market has been in denial on higher rates for longer. Inflation has backed off in terms of the headline numbers, but that was caused by a collapse in energy prices. Once you take that out, and once you look at the underlying dynamics, inflation really hasn't come down much. And now in the second half, we're seeing elements where it's picking up again. So this is something that's going to happen. This inflation has taken off. It's not going to just vanish, and interest rates are having to adjust to that. The bond market is now coming to grips with that. So longer-term interest rates, for example, our 10-year Treasury rate has now decidedly moved over 4%. It's still below short-term rates, but it's moving closer. And, so now there's increasingly an understanding that inflation won't go back to 2%, that interest rates won't go back to 2%, the short-term rates. And so, the bond market is starting to look at 5% as a risk-free rate longer term, and maybe higher. And a 5% Treasury rate means roughly 8% mortgage rates here in the United States. Treasury rates could go higher than that. The government is issuing a huge amount of debt right now. They're increasing the longer-term debt sales. We've covered that in August. They came out with this new data on it. So there's a huge amount of supply coming in on the market. Foreign buyers are not super enthusiastic about the U.S. debt anymore, so they've kind of pulled back a little bit. And so it's domestic buyers. And there's a lot of enthusiasm for Treasury bills right now, which pay 5.5% roughly. And there's not a lot of enthusiasm to buying a 10-year Treasury that pays 4.2%. So the enthusiasm for the 10-year Treasury will increase as the rates go up, as the yields go up. So, at 5% on 10 years, there'll be quite a bit of demand. And then if it goes over 5%, there'll be lots of demand. So, the government will be able to sell lots of these securities, but the yields will have to be quite a bit higher than where they are today to attract buyers.
During this significant inflation, are some people living on their credit cards? Wolf, during this significant inflation, are some people living on their credit cards, and is it a sign of trouble if you have to buy your groceries with a credit card?
Yeah, we always hear that about these poor Americans, but turns out credit cards are the dominant payment method. So people pay for just about everything with their credit cards now. Well, I say just about everything. Debit cards are the second most dominant payment method. So they combined around nearly $10 trillion worth of spending in the United States. Credit cards alone are nearly $5 trillion. And this is money that consumers are spending, not borrowing. Most of this money is paid off every month and never incurs interest. So when you look at the credit card balances, those are statement balances. Those are the balances that people have on their credit card statements when they get it, and they pay it off the next month most of the time. And that's what we're seeing in the credit card balances. We're seeing spending is going up, and so we see the balances rise because spending is going up because people are spending on their credit cards, because that's about the only measure. We used to write checks. They're gone. Nobody's using checks anymore, and cash payments are out the window. So now most payment methods are credit cards or debit cards, and credit cards being the dominant one. And so people are spending a lot of money right now. And the reason why they're spending, and I call them the drunken sailors, because they're spending like drunken sailors. There's no slowdown in consumer spending. But of course, what they're doing is they're spending their pay raises. We've gotten the biggest pay increases in 40 years. This year, the pay increases, they're over 5.5% now. They're outrunning our headline inflation. Last year, inflation was higher than the pay increases. We have the union negotiations going on right now all over the country, and they're looking at 20% increases for the first year and 40% spread over 4 or 5 years. So these are huge pay increases, and that's where a lot of this, nearly all of the spending growth comes from, is from the wage increases that have been broad-based. Minimum wages in states and cities have gone up all over the place. So it's been at the lower levels, it's been the upper levels. There's still a labor shortage in many areas, so companies are having to fork over lots of money to attract workers, and that's what's holding up the spending. Drunken sailors is really the expression that I use now and have for months, because there is no consumer spending slowdown. People are spending those pay increases, and they're making money on their investments now. They're making money on CDs and money market funds and the treasury bills. There's $10 trillion in savings products in the United States. There's $5 trillion in money market funds that consumers have. They have trillions in treasury bills, and all of this stuff is earning 5% now, and they're spending this income. A lot of retirees are now really excited about the money they're making. Our Social Security cost of living adjustment was 8.7% for this year, so people are making a lot more money than they did last year, and retirees that spend every dime they get, they get 8.7% more. They're going to spend 8.7% more. And, so we've seen this across the board, and credit cards play only a role in increasing, sales. They're not, in terms of consumer spending, they're really not a borrowing device. They're too expensive. People borrow in other ways, not credit cards, and the amount of debt held by credit card holders is pretty small. The amount of interest-bearing debt, is pretty small, even though they pay a lot of interest on it, but the amounts are pretty small, and they don't contribute significantly or even measurably to consumer spending.
We'll have more with Wolf Richter right after this.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Wolf Richter. Wolf, what's going on with the robo-taxis in San Francisco?
Yeah, that's, it's all over the media. I mean, San Francisco is not the only city that has robo-taxis now, but when it has San Francisco in the headline, everybody talks about it. They're everywhere here. I see them all the time. They're driving around empty. They're driving around with passengers in it. A couple of weeks ago, the state of California, the Public Utilities Commission allowed for the full commercialization of robo-taxis in San Francisco, day and night, anytime. And with unlimited fleet sizes. So that is new. That has changed. Before it was restricted when they could take paying fares, and they could do that. Now there's all these reports about robo-taxis getting in trouble of some sort, interfering with first responders or getting stalled in an intersection, that kind of stuff. So let me just say, San Francisco is a very difficult environment to navigate in. There's steep hills. It's incredibly congested. Hills means you can't see. You go up a steep hill, you don't see what's in the intersection. You don't see what's on the other side. You don't see what's coming down the side streets. So the building where we live is on an intersection, 4-lane with a 2-lane. It's on a hill, and legally people turn right on red here, and they can't see what's coming up the hill. So you have this moron that turns right on red, doesn't see what's coming up on the hill. Then you have another moron that's trying to get through the light before it turns red, and he's barreling up the hill, just stepping on the accelerator, can't see what's in the intersection, and you have an accident right there. And we have 1 or 2 accidents every month in this intersection. It's motorcyclists flying around, it's pedestrians getting hit, it's cars hitting each other because they can't see. One guy came in a Mustang, came down the hill on the other side, tried to turn right, didn't make the turn, was speeding, didn't make the turn. There's a steep hill on the other side, didn't make the turn, careened across the sidewalk and hit our building. And, this stuff is always going on. And, I'm so looking for robo-taxis to take over because, this obviously is not happening. They're not taking over, but human drivers are morons. Human drivers are terrible. They do stupid things, and they cause accidents. They cause 40,000 traffic fatalities in the United States. Human drivers cause millions of severely severe injuries in the United States every year. So now we have robo-taxis, and they do not make those mistakes. They don't make those mistakes. They don't come speeding up a street to get through the light, and where they can't see the intersection. They go a speed limit or below. When the light turns yellow, they step on the brake. They don't turn right on red when they can't see. They do all the right things. But there's one thing that they are not very good at, and they don't respond to first responders. So if a fire truck needs a vehicle to get out of the way, they yell at the human driver, get out of the way, move left, move right, and the human driver will do that. A robo-taxi won't. It just ignores the first responders, and there are discussions underway to allow somehow the first responders to communicate with robo-taxis, but that has been a big issue. I mean, human drivers hit fire trucks quite a bit. That come down the wrong side of the street. They go through intersections on red, and even though they have the sirens blaring, but you can't often hear it. You don't know where it's coming from in a city like San Francisco because the buildings are close together. You can't see around corners, and so we had a robo-taxi hit a fire truck that was going through an intersection on the wrong side of the street, and you have that. That's not unusual, but it was the first robo-taxi that did that. We had robo-taxis get stalled in an intersection because, a passerby decided to confuse them, and they're easy to confuse. And when you confuse a robo-taxi, they just stop, and especially the taxis, the robo-taxis that GM puts out, the Cruise models, they're having most of these problems. The Waymo models, so that those are the Google ones, they have fewer problems, it seems. And so now the city of San Francisco is all upset because we have some of these issues. And first responders, they have real legitimate complaints because they cannot tell these vehicles to get out of the way. They cannot. They just stop when they get confused. They stop, and they run over fire hoses, and they tell them not to, and they don't respond to that. And so they need to have a way to communicate with these robo-taxis, and that's being worked on. But there needs to be a secure way for first responders to communicate with these vehicles. And then we have a lot of labor unions now really opposing robo-taxis because that's exactly what's happening. The Uber drivers are being replaced by robo-taxis. And then there'll be others, there'll be delivery drivers, and then this will go on. And we've waited for 10 years for this to happen. And 10 years ago, we poo-pooed these robo-taxis. It's never going to happen. Now we have them in the street. They're all over the place. They're driving. They're good drivers. They're much better than human drivers in most situations because I don't do these stupid things. But there's some stuff that confuses them, and then they stop or they don't react properly to it. So you've got that. But they're really a threat to the labor force that is driving. I mean, that is a very serious threat. There's said to be 70,000, 80,000 Uber drivers in San Francisco. They don't live here necessarily. They live outside somewhere, but they work in San Francisco driving people around. And that is a serious threat that needs to be dealt with. I mean, these are jobs. It's 80,000 jobs. Obviously, it will take a very long time for there to be enough robo-taxis to replace these drivers. I mean, we're talking many years because the technology is not perfected. There's still, San Francisco is just a petri dish. They're experimenting with them in San Francisco to learn different things. So this is far from being a full-blown reality yet in terms of replacing 80,000 drivers in San Francisco. But this is the threat for the future. It needs to be dealt with. And, there's a lot of resistance in San Francisco now against these robo-taxis because of the labor issues that this poses. And now people who drive, who are passengers in them, they're pretty happy with them. They're pretty happy with the driving. They're smooth. They don't do anything erratic. You don't have the issues of having a rude driver, that kind of stuff. So, the passengers are generally pretty happy with them, but there's a lot of resistance in San Francisco to it, and the city has asked the state to curtail the use of these commercialized robo-taxis, and the state has now done that with the cruise taxis, not with Waymo, but with the cruise models, and have cut their fleet down that they can use because of some of the incidences. And so, there's quite a bit of upheaval, and, passerbys make fun of these robo-taxis and get in the way and confuse them, and then they block stuff, come to a halt and block stuff, so, you have that kind of thing going on, but I'm amazed with how good these vehicles actually are. I mean, 10 years ago, it's like, no, this will never happen. It's impossible, and I have blog posts on my site to that effect, and it is happening. They're pretty good drivers, they're better than human drivers in most situations, and so it's here, and it's going to expand, and it's going to take away the jobs of drivers over the next many years, and we know that, and that's an issue. And, there's a lot of rebellion against it now, too.
What are you hearing on 15-minute smart cities?
Well, the interesting thing is that cities, for thousands of years have always been that way. The idea is that you can walk everywhere you need to go within a fairly short period. So you need to go to the store to buy some food. You need to go to do anything. You can do it on foot in a short period of time. When I was a kid, in Germany, there was a butcher shop on every 3 blocks. There was a baker every 3 blocks. There was a little grocery store every 3 blocks. You could do everything you wanted to in 15 minutes. And there's daycare centers, pretty close by, and schools we walk to just in a few minutes. And then, now, we have superhighways. So this was 1950s, 60s. And now we have superhighways. Everybody's driving, and we've gotten used to the separation of neighborhoods from commercial districts. So we have these vast suburbs and the vast areas of single-family houses with essentially no infrastructure in the neighborhood, and then there's a main street, and there's some infrastructure on the main street, but you need to drive 3 or 4 miles to the grocery store. You need to drive 5 miles to drop your kid off. You need to drive 50 miles to go to work. We've got these incredibly drawn-out cities, this urban sprawl that's everywhere, and so, the 15-minute city, there's nothing new. That's been around forever. In the United States, for many years, there has now been a concentration of the urban core, so they've built up large amounts of multifamily towers, so apartment buildings and condo buildings, often higher end buildings, and it's expensive to live there, but you can walk to work, you can walk to the store, you can drop off your kids downstairs, that kind of thing, and it's really practical. At the same time, suburbs have continued to grow, and people have sort of separated by what they prefer. And some people like to live in their own house surrounded by a yard and have, lots of houses around them. And then they drive, 40, 50 miles to work, and that's what they want. And other people like to live in urban cores and maybe not even have a car and get everything done around where you live. And so there's these two different mindsets, and it makes sense for both, and I'm, it's always great that people can do whatever they want to do, and if you want to live in the suburbs and have a nice big house, with a big yard, and then you commute or work an hour to work, I mean, sure, that's great that you want to do that, but somebody else might not, and then they can live in a condo and live inside that 15-minute smart city. The bad thing is that these new neighborhoods that have grown up have nothing in them. They're just houses. And so there's no infrastructure there. That you have to drive everywhere you go. And, but if people like that, that's fine. There's a little bit of an urban movement in terms of planning to increase the housing density in the urban cores, instead of having 2-story houses or single-family houses to replace them with multi-story houses, those kinds of things. And that's been happening in all big cities, in Manhattan, in San Francisco, in Boston, in Los Angeles. In all big cities, you have the urban cores getting denser and denser, and people who want to live in them, they live in them. And it's a very practical, nice way of living. And people who don't like that, they live outside. There's no dictatorship that says we're going to bulldoze all suburbs and force everybody to live in high-rise buildings. That's not happening. I mean, there's some conspiracy theories out there that perverted this, and it's just ridiculous. What they've come up is just laughable. But we do have this dual approach now, and many people who don't want to live in the suburbs have very good options in urban cores now, and the 15-minute city is alive and well. And I don't have a car here in San Francisco. My wife takes it to work, and I'm on foot. I go everywhere on foot. It's beautiful. It's great, and I don't need to even use mass transit because I love to walk. And it's just once you get used to it, it's great. You get exercise while you commute, so if you don't like it, you can move outside. It takes an hour to come in, and maybe you work one day a week in the office, so that's worth the commute. And so people choose, and this kind of fake resistance to the 15-minute city is just baloney. It's people making up a bunch of clickbait nonsense about something that has existed for eons, and that people can choose if they want to, and don't need to choose if they don't want to.
Wolf, anything else we should be keeping a close eye on right now?
Yes, definitely. My website, wolfstreet.com. Wolf Street, so no politics, just business, finance, and money. And we cover all the financial, business, and economic issues that are important. It's free. You don't have to sign up for anything. You don't have to pay for anything. So just come to wolfstreet.com.
Wolf, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you, Jim.
My guest has been Wolf Richter, publisher of wolfstreet.com. He was speaking to us from San Francisco. If you have any questions for Wolf or for any of our guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. We'll ask that question for you. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter @HowStreet. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.